The only sound is the rhythmic scratching of your pencil on paper. You sketch, you draw, you create, pouring your deepest thoughts, your unspoken dreams, and the very essence of who you are into the pages of a notebook that feels more like a secret haven than a mere sketchbook. Now, imagine one day, completely unexpectedly, someone finds that sketchbook. Not just anyone, but someone who has the power to change your life forever, someone who sees your art not just as drawings, but as a gateway to something far bigger than you ever imagined. Someone who has the connections, the influence, and the ambition to take you from the shadows of your room to the blinding spotlight of fame. Sounds like a story you'd love to hear, doesn't it? But hold on, this is more than just a fantasy or a fairy tale. This is real. Or at least, it was for one person. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll know who they are, what happened, and the incredible twist that changed everything. Now, let's slow down for a second. How many of us, deep down, harbor a quiet dream? Maybe it's a hidden talent, a passion we keep to ourselves because we fear the world might not understand. How many of you have ever created something, whether it's a drawing, a poem, or even a song, and kept it locked away, not because it's not good enough, but because you weren't ready for the world to see it? Maybe you're like the artist at the heart of this story, someone who poured their heart and soul into their art, but kept it private, unsure of what would happen if anyone else saw it. This artist was just like you, but one fateful day, everything changed. When she least expected it, a stranger found her sketchbook. What happened next isn't just a story of discovering a hidden talent, it's the story of how one person's art caught the eye of someone with the power to turn it into something more than she ever dreamed possible. It's a story of ambition, creativity, and the raw, unpredictable forces that can shape our lives. But here's the catch. This wasn't a typical someone gets discovered and becomes famous story. There's a twist. This was a discovery that set in motion a whirlwind of events, a domino effect that led to unimaginable opportunities, but also dangerous consequences. The line between artist and celebrity blurred faster than you can imagine. What was meant to be a life-changing break turned into a roller coaster of fame, public scrutiny, and personal transformation. What happened when she was thrust into the limelight is something no one could have predicted, and it all started with one simple act: finding that sketchbook. Here's where it gets even more intriguing. This person didn't just find the sketchbook and offer a quick route to fame. No, the path wasn't that easy. It was messy, complicated, and filled with moments where everything seemed to be spiraling out of control. For our artist, this newfound fame wasn't just a dream, it was a nightmare at times. What happens when you get exactly what you wanted, only to realize it's not what you thought it would be? When the spotlight shines too bright, and everyone's watching, waiting for you to slip up. This story is not just about success, it's about the price of success, the sacrifices you make, and the cost of living a life that everyone else is constantly observing. So, I want you to think for a moment. What would you do if you were in her shoes? What if you had an entire world of possibilities open up to you, but with that came a loss of control? What if you became someone's project, someone else's idea of who you should be? This is the heart of her story, and it's not just about art. It's about identity, self-discovery, and navigating the dizzying heights of fame and recognition. It's about what happens when you're no longer just yourself, you're the person everyone wants you to be. But before we dive deeper into this roller coaster of emotions and revelations, let me ask you a question. Can you feel the tension building? Are you curious about how it all went down? Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. The real mystery, the real story, is about to unfold, and it's going to keep you on the edge of your seat. This isn't just about the discovery of an artist. It's about how one decision, one moment of exposure, can completely alter the course of someone's life. What's more fascinating is that the artist in question had no idea her art would catch the eye of someone so influential, someone who was able to catapult her from obscurity to stardom. But not all stardom is golden. And that's where the twist comes in. You see, as much as this artist wanted recognition, there's a price to be paid. A price that she didn't foresee. And it all comes down to that one sketchbook. By now, you're probably wondering, what happened next? Who was the person that discovered her art? And how did everything change so quickly? Stay tuned, because we're about to uncover the layers of this incredible story, one that will leave you questioning the true meaning of success and fame. But here's the catch: the path to fame was not as simple as it seemed. There were moments of doubt, decisions that couldn't be undone, and a world of people pulling her in every direction. Fame wasn't just a gift, it was a challenge, one that tested her in ways she never anticipated. And through it all, the question remained, was it worth it? Keep watching, because we're only just getting started. Our artist, let's call her Lily, hadn't always been someone who dreamed of stardom. In fact, it wasn't even something she'd ever considered. To Lily, art was a personal escape, a way to communicate what words couldn't. Her sketchbook was filled with her innermost thoughts, doodles of dark figures, fragmented faces, and abstract shapes that expressed emotions she couldn't otherwise articulate. She wasn't seeking validation or recognition. Instead, she found comfort in the act of creation, the quiet moments of self-expression. Her world was small, lived mostly within the confines of her tiny, cluttered apartment in a city that never seemed to slow down. She worked a 9-to-5 job at a coffee shop, serving regulars their drinks with a smile, all while dreaming of something more, though she never dared to reach for it. But something was shifting in Lily's life, something she didn't fully understand. She had started to notice small things, anxiety creeping into her mornings, an unease in her heart that didn't quite match the peace she once found in her artwork. Maybe it was the pressure of having to keep up with a life that felt increasingly out of reach, or maybe it was the slow realization that her dream of simply being left alone with her art was fading. She didn't have the answers yet, but she knew something was changing, and not necessarily for the better. Lily's days began to bleed into one another, a haze of work, isolation, and sporadic bursts of creativity that seemed to come in waves. Yet, despite everything, she kept sketching, kept creating. She'd never shared her art with anyone, not truly. Sure, she'd posted the occasional drawing on her barely followed Instagram account, but it wasn't serious. It was just for fun. Just for her. No one seemed to care, and that suited her fine. But as much as she wanted to stay in her bubble, something about the world outside kept pulling at her, a constant reminder that there was more out there than her quiet existence. One rainy afternoon, while working her shift at the coffee shop, Lily had noticed a man sitting in the corner booth. He'd been a regular, but that day something was different. His presence was intriguing. He wasn't like the usual customers who came in to grab their coffee and leave quickly. This man lingered, observing the room with a quiet intensity. There was a certain sharpness to his gaze that felt like he wasn't just looking at the people around him but analyzing them, studying them as if they were all part of some bigger puzzle. At first, Lily didn't think much of it. She'd seen all kinds of people, after all. But as the days passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that this man was watching her. His name was David, though Lily hadn't learned that until a week later when he finally spoke to her. It was casual at first, a simple compliment about the way she made her lattes, but over time, their brief interactions grew longer, and she began to notice the way his questions weren't just small talk. David wanted to know about her life, her interests, her goals. He asked about her artwork. In truth, Lily had never been comfortable talking about her sketches with anyone. It was her private world, not for the public eye. But David seemed to have a way of drawing out her thoughts, making her feel like her art was important, special. Slowly, she began to show him a few of her pieces, not expecting much, just a passing exchange between two strangers. But then, one day, David did something that completely changed the course of her life. He asked to see her sketchbook. "You've got real talent, Lily. Don't you want to do something with it?" he said, his tone sincere, almost too convincing. Lily hesitated. She knew what this meant, the possibility of sharing her work with someone else, someone who might not just admire it but also want to take it further. She had never imagined anything like that. And yet, the thought of someone seeing her art, really seeing it, was oddly tempting. Maybe it was because David had this confidence about him, this air of authority that made her feel like he understood something she had yet to fully grasp about herself. So, she let him see it. She handed him the sketchbook. What happened next was something Lily couldn't have prepared for. David didn't just look at the sketches and offer praise. He recognized something in them. "This is it, Lily," he said. "You've got potential." You could be a star. His words were delivered with a kind of certainty that both comforted and unnerved her. It felt like a promise she didn't know if she was ready to believe. He was convinced that she could make it, that her art was worth something far greater than just sitting in a dusty corner of her apartment. But here's where things started to take a turn. David didn't stop at simply admiring her art. He began talking about connections, about how he could help her get noticed. He mentioned art galleries, exhibitions, people who could take her work to the next level. Lily was overwhelmed, unsure of what to do with the opportunity. She'd never thought about her art like that, never imagined it being seen by so many people. Was it really possible? Could she be someone more than just the girl who drew in the quiet of her room? The more David pushed, the more conflicted Lily became. On the one hand, the idea of turning her art into something more was intoxicating. Who wouldn't want recognition? But on the other hand, there was something unsettling about David's persistence. It was as if he had already decided what her future should look like, as if he was molding her into something she didn't yet fully understand. But here's the kicker: as David worked his way deeper into her life, Lily began to notice strange things happening around her. The coffee shop started to feel different, like people were paying attention to her more than before. Her social media following grew, even though she hadn't posted anything new. Small whispers started circulating about her work, and she couldn't figure out how or why. Had David been sharing her sketches with people without her consent? If so, what was his endgame? Was he really trying to help her, or was he using her talent for his own gain? The questions began to pile up. Lily had no answers, and yet, she found herself in the midst of something much bigger than she ever expected. The more David seemed to push her toward the spotlight, the more distant and controlling he became. It felt like she was being swept into a tide she couldn't swim against. And while her art was finally getting the recognition she never thought it deserved, she started to wonder, at what cost? What was David really after? Was he the key to her success, or was he the first piece in a much larger puzzle that she couldn't yet see? As Lily's life began to unravel, more people came into the picture, some who seemed to want to help her, and others who appeared to be taking advantage of her newfound fame. It was becoming harder to tell who could be trusted and who might be using her. As Lily's life continued to spiral into the unfamiliar world of attention and fame, she began to feel the weight of it all. What started as excitement over her growing recognition soon gave way to unease. The pressure was mounting, everyone had expectations of her now. She was no longer just an artist, she was Lily, the artist. And with that title came an invisible string, pulling her in all sorts of directions, tethered to people she barely knew, but who all had something to gain from her success. The deeper she went, the less sure she became of who was on her side, and who was only out for themselves. David, the man who had once appeared to be her biggest advocate, started behaving more and more like a puppeteer. His calls became more frequent, his messages more insistent. You need to get this gallery deal sorted. You can't afford to wait, Lily. Do you want to be just another forgotten artist, or do you want to be someone who makes a mark? His words were sharp, but they didn't have the same encouraging tone they once had. There was something forceful about them now, a coldness creeping in. And yet, Lily still felt drawn to him. She couldn't shake the belief that without him, her art would never get the recognition it deserved. But her instincts were telling her something different. Was he truly helping her, or was he simply pushing her into a life she didn't want, a life she wasn't sure was even hers to begin with? It was on one of these long, late-night phone calls that Lily noticed something strange. David was talking about the future, about opportunities that would change everything, but as she listened more closely, something didn't feel right. There was a disconnect between his words and the way he was speaking. He was getting too comfortable with her success, too eager to push her further, faster. Then, something unusual happened, something that made Lily's stomach drop. While they were talking about a potential collaboration with a major art dealer, David casually mentioned a name, one that sounded oddly familiar. It was a name she hadn't heard in years. It was the name of a woman who had been a mentor to Lily in her early art school days, someone who had helped her refine her skills and encouraged her to pursue a career in art. But the last time Lily had seen her, things had ended on a bitter note. There was an incident, a falling out, something about a stolen piece of artwork, accusations, and a betrayal that Lily had never fully understood. Her mentor had disappeared from her life shortly after, and Lily had put the whole thing behind her. Yet, here David was, mentioning this woman as if everything was fine, as if they had some kind of secret agreement she didn't know about. "Don't worry," David said, trying to brush off Lily's confusion. "She's part of the reason I'm making all these connections for you. You just have to trust me, okay?" But Lily couldn't shake the unease that had begun to settle in her chest. Why was David bringing up someone from her past? Why now? And why was he so insistent on making sure she didn't know too much about their previous interactions? It didn't add up. The more she thought about it, the more the pieces started to feel out of place. Lily tried to dig deeper, reaching out to old friends and contacts who might know what had really happened with her former mentor. But as she started asking around, things became even more unsettling. Some people seemed to avoid the topic entirely, refusing to talk about it or giving vague, dismissive responses. One person, a former classmate who had once been close to both Lily and her mentor, even went so far as to warn her. "Lily, you don't want to dig into that. Trust me. It's better if you just leave it alone," they said, their voice tense, their eyes darting around like they were afraid someone might be listening. The warning felt too ominous to ignore. Was someone trying to stop her from uncovering the truth? Or was there something else, something darker, lurking in the past that no one wanted her to know? Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from her, something that could shatter the carefully crafted narrative she had been sold by David and others around her. The more she tried to peel back the layers, the more she felt like she was being led down a rabbit hole with no clear way out. But just when she thought she was getting closer to finding some answers, the unthinkable happened. The very sketchbook that had started it all, her precious, personal collection of drawings and sketches, vanished. One morning, it was simply gone. No sign of it anywhere in her apartment. Her heart dropped as she searched frantically, her mind racing through 1,000 possibilities. Had someone taken it? Had David? The one thing that had felt like her last connection to her true self, her art, was now missing. She called David, but his response was unsettlingly calm. "I'm sure it's just misplaced. You're probably overthinking things. Don't stress about it." But Lily couldn't let it go. She knew something was off. Why would David be so nonchalant about it? Could he have been the one to take it? Was he hiding something in those pages that he didn't want her to see? Her suspicions were growing, and with each unanswered question, the tension mounted. She had to find the sketchbook. It was the key to everything. As Lily continued to search for answers, she started to feel like she was in a web, one that was tightening around her with every move she made. People who once seemed like allies now felt distant, almost like they were part of something she didn't understand. Was David truly her ally, or was he playing a dangerous game? Was her former mentor involved, or was there someone else, someone even more hidden in the shadows, pulling strings behind the scenes? And what about the sketchbook? Was it gone for good, or was it being kept from her for a reason? The deeper Lily dug, the more she realized that the story she had been living wasn't the one she thought it was. There were too many secrets, too many people with their own agendas. And with every step she took toward uncovering the truth, it felt like something or someone was trying to stop her. As the mystery grew, Lily found herself standing at the edge of a revelation that could change everything. But the more she searched for the truth, the more she questioned who she could trust and whether she was ready for the answers that might be waiting for her. What if the truth was more dangerous than she ever imagined? What if the people she thought she could trust were the very ones holding the key to her downfall? The more Lily uncovered, the less she knew, and the more questions loomed over her head. And the sketchbook, her one remaining thread to understanding everything, was still missing. But what if the sketchbook wasn't just a piece of art? What if it was a weapon? What if what was inside could ruin everything? Lily didn't know how much longer she could hold on before the secrets completely consumed her. As if the tension surrounding Lily wasn't enough, the story took another sharp turn when her best friend, Emily, received a cryptic message that seemed to be tied to Lily's growing web of mystery. Emily had been there for Lily through it all, supporting her when the art world seemed like a distant dream and cheering her on as her sketches started to garner more attention. She had always been the voice of reason in Lily's life, the one person who could ground her when she started to spiral. But lately, even Emily had started to feel the pressure, noticing changes in Lily's behavior, the late-night phone calls, and the way David seemed to be slowly taking over. Emily had tried to brush it off, but deep down, she sensed something wasn't right. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but the unease in Lily's eyes was enough to make her suspicious. One evening, as Emily was leaving work late, she found a strange envelope waiting for her outside her apartment door. It was a plain, unmarked envelope, no return address, no indication of who it was from. Her first instinct was to toss it, dismiss it as some kind of junk mail, but something made her hesitate. The envelope felt too purposeful, like it had been placed there with intention. When she opened it, her breath caught. Inside, there was a single piece of paper, with nothing written on it but a simple phrase, "Stop looking, or it will be too late." Emily's heart raced. She didn't know what to make of it, but she knew one thing: it was connected to Lily. She had seen the signs, the way Lily had been pulling away, the way David had started to dominate every aspect of her life, and the way Lily had become obsessed with finding the missing sketchbook. Emily couldn't ignore it any longer. Someone was sending messages to both of them, trying to control the narrative, to steer them away from the truth. But why? What was the secret so dangerous that they needed to be silenced? The more Emily thought about it, the more she realized the message wasn't just a threat, it was a warning. Someone wanted them to stop digging, to stop uncovering whatever it was that lay beneath the surface. But who? And why now? The timing was too perfect. Emily had been trying to protect Lily from herself, from falling deeper into this web that David seemed to be weaving around her, but now it felt like they were both in over their heads. If this was someone trying to control them, they were playing a much bigger game than either of them had anticipated. Emily, despite her fear, knew she couldn't just ignore it. She immediately went to Lily's apartment, determined to talk to her about the message, about everything that had been happening. But when she arrived, she found the door unlocked, the place eerily quiet. Lily wasn't there. Her heart skipped a beat as she searched the apartment, but everything seemed out of place. Her phone was gone, her coat was missing, everything was as if she had just vanished. The only thing left behind was an open window, the faint sound of the wind rustling the curtains. It was as if Lily had simply walked out, leaving no trace behind. Emily's mind raced. What was happening? Where had Lily gone? And why hadn't she told her anything? The cryptic message, the missing sketchbook, the unsettling behavior, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together. Had David been involved? Was he behind the warning, trying to scare them off? Or was there something even darker at play? In the days that followed, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Lily was in danger. She tried calling David, hoping for answers, but his responses were vague, dismissive. He insisted that everything was fine, that Lily just needed some space, that the pressure of everything getting so big had simply overwhelmed her. But Emily didn't buy it. Something about the way David spoke, the way he tried to downplay the situation, made her skin crawl. Was he protecting Lily, or was he keeping her from something or someone? Emily knew she had to take matters into her own hands. She started digging into David's past, hoping to find any connection, any piece of information that might explain his growing influence over Lily. What she found was more troubling than she could have imagined. David's connections weren't just limited to the art world. He had ties to people far more dangerous, people who didn't operate in the open, people who preferred to stay behind the scenes, pulling strings without anyone noticing. As Emily delved deeper, she uncovered a trail of shady dealings, hidden alliances, and murky financial transactions that suggested David wasn't just an art promoter, he was part of something much darker. Something that had been brewing long before Lily even walked into that coffee shop. And then, just when Emily thought things couldn't get any more confusing, she found something that made her question everything. One of Lily's old sketches, one she had never seen before, popped up in an online auction. It wasn't one of the pieces that had been shared with the public. It wasn't part of the portfolio that David had been showcasing. No, this was a drawing from the early days of Lily's art, something deeply personal, something only she had ever seen. The auction listing was vague, almost as if someone was trying to sell it quickly without attracting attention. The bidding was low, but something about the whole situation felt off, like it wasn't meant to be found. Emily tried to trace the auction back to its origin, But all the details were hidden behind a shell company, and the auction itself had disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. The strange appearance of the sketch was a clear sign that something was slipping through the cracks, that someone was moving too quickly, trying to cover their tracks before it all came unraveled. Who was behind this? Was it David? Had someone gotten to him, or was there a larger force at play? What did Lily's missing sketchbook have to do with all of this? Emily was running out of time. Every lead she followed seemed to lead to another dead end, and with Lily still missing, every second counted. She couldn't help but feel like she was being watched, like someone was always one step ahead of her. But the more she uncovered, the more certain she became that Lily wasn't the only one being manipulated. There were too many layers to this story, too many secrets buried beneath the surface. And as Emily began to put the pieces together, she realized that the only way to uncover the truth was to take a risk, a dangerous one that might cost her everything. Just as she was about to confront David once more, she received another message. This time, there was no warning, no cryptic phrasing, just a single line of text. "You've been warned. Leave it alone, or you'll never find her." The words felt like a threat, a direct challenge, but Emily couldn't stop now. She had to know the truth. No matter where it led. The creeping sense of unease that had been gnawing at Emily for days finally erupted into something she couldn't ignore. She'd been obsessively going through every detail, combing through old messages, retracing steps, and piecing together the unsettling puzzle of Lily's disappearance. But that night, as she sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through the latest leads, a chill ran down her spine, a prickling sensation that something was very, very wrong. Her phone buzzed with a new message, but it wasn't from anyone she knew. The text was brief, cryptic, and chilling in its simplicity. "Stop searching, or you will never see her again." The words seemed to hang in the air, suffocating her. Emily stared at the screen, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the text. Was this a joke? Had someone hacked into her phone, or was it really a warning? She couldn't tell anymore. The further she dug into this mess, the more it felt like she was unraveling a thread that could snap at any moment, dragging her into a dark abyss she wasn't ready for. But then, just when she thought it couldn't get any worse, the events of that night escalated beyond what she had imagined. It happened so quickly, so violently, that Emily didn't even have time to process it. She decided to meet up with her old friend, Jake, someone who had once been close to both her and Lily, hoping he might shed some light on the situation. He'd been quiet lately, almost too quiet, but she figured that maybe he knew something she could use. As Emily left her apartment, she glanced over her shoulder, an instinctive feeling that she was being watched. She shook it off, telling herself it was just the stress getting to her, but deep down, she couldn't ignore the gnawing thought that someone was out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting. She took the usual route to the bar where Jake had agreed to meet her, trying to shake off the paranoia that had been building. But as she turned a corner, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. The street was eerily quiet, too quiet. A few people walked by, but there was something about the stillness in the air that felt wrong. She quickened her pace, her steps echoing in the emptiness around her, but just as she was about to cross the street, a dark figure emerged from an alleyway, blocking her path. Emily froze. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, but there was a sense of purpose in the way it stood there, like it was waiting for her. Her heart pounded in her chest, her thoughts scrambling. She couldn't see the person's face, but something about the silhouette was familiar, too familiar. Before she could process anything further, the figure turned and disappeared into the shadows, vanishing just as quickly as it had appeared. Emily stood there for a long moment, too stunned to react, her body tense and cold. She took a hesitant step forward, unsure of what to do, but then something caught her eye. There, on the ground, just in front of where the figure had been standing, was a small, leather-bound notebook. It wasn't hers. It wasn't Lily's either. But it was unmistakably important. Her instincts screamed at her to leave it alone, to turn around and walk away, but something pulled her in. She bent down to pick it up, her fingers grazing the cover. The moment she touched it, a sharp, high-pitched sound rang in her ears, a noise so sudden and loud that it almost felt like the world itself had shifted. Emily stumbled back, heart racing, as she glanced around wildly. But the street was empty. The figure was gone. Whoever had left the notebook was long gone too. Against every ounce of caution, Emily opened the notebook, the pages thick with what appeared to be sketches. But they weren't just any sketches. They were rough, dark, and disturbing, distorted faces, twisted figures, images that reminded her of Lily's work, but these were different. These weren't her creations. These were things that felt off. There was a desperation in the lines, a sense of urgency, like the artist had been trying to escape something terrifying. The further Emily flipped through the pages, the more she recognized the familiar feeling of dread. These sketches weren't just drawings. They were messages. Cryptic symbols, patterns, images that seemed to bleed into one another in an almost hypnotic way. But there was something else, something hidden between the drawings, something that Emily could almost make out, but not quite. A cold breeze swept through the alley as Emily's hands shook. She needed to take this back to her apartment. She needed to analyze it, piece it together, figure out what the sketches meant. But as she tucked the notebook under her arm and started to turn, she froze. The air felt thick, suffocating. She could hear footsteps behind her, quick and deliberate, getting closer. Someone was following her. Her breath hitched as she quickened her pace, her pulse pounding in her ears. She had to get to safety. She turned a corner, and then another, desperately trying to lose whoever was tailing her. But no matter how fast she ran, the footsteps kept getting closer. Emily rounded another corner, and then, in a blur of panic, she collided with something, or rather, someone. Her head spun, and for a moment, everything went black. When she came to, she was lying on the ground, the notebook clutched tightly in her hands. Her heart was racing, but everything around her was still. No one was there. No one had followed her. It was as if the whole thing had been a figment of her imagination. But she knew it wasn't. The feeling of being hunted, the unmistakable sense that someone had been right on her heels, she couldn't shake it. And the worst part was that the feeling didn't go away. It stayed with her, clawing at the edges of her mind, whispering that she wasn't safe. That no one was. Emily's thoughts were frantic as she stood up, trying to regain some sense of composure. But the reality of what was happening was becoming clearer. She wasn't just chasing a missing person anymore. She was in this story, too. She was part of something bigger, something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Every step she took, every lead she followed, was pulling her deeper into a world she didn't belong to, a world that was far darker than she could ever have anticipated. And Lily, her friend, the one who had set all of this into motion, was now more of a mystery than ever. As Emily walked back to her apartment, the weight of the situation began to sink in. She didn't know who was watching her, who was behind the cryptic messages, or who had been following her in the shadows. But she knew one thing for sure: there was no going back. She was caught in the middle of something twisted, and every instinct in her screamed that there was no way out. The danger was real, and it was getting closer by the second. Just when Emily thought she was finally beginning to piece together the disjointed puzzle of Lily's disappearance, everything shifted in a way she couldn't have prepared for. She had been on edge, constantly looking over her shoulder, haunted by the strange events of the past few days. But the breaking point came that evening, when she sat down to meet Jake, hoping he might offer some clarity. She had trusted him once, he had always been Lily's confidant, the one person who could talk her down when the world seemed to be closing in. So when he called her, frantic and sounding out of breath, she didn't hesitate. He asked to meet, urgently. It seemed like an opportunity to finally make sense of everything that had been happening. What she didn't expect, however, was the bombshell he would drop once she arrived. The cafe where they met was almost empty, save for a few patrons hunched over their laptops. Jake was sitting in a corner, his face drawn, and for the first time since she'd known him, there was something guarded in his eyes, something she couldn't quite place. As she approached, he immediately gestured for her to sit, his voice low, as if someone might be listening. Emily couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. She had barely sat down when Jake leaned in, his gaze flickering around the room before he spoke in a hushed tone. "I think you need to know the truth about Lily. And about me." His words hit her like a punch, and for a second, her mind raced, unsure of what he meant. He paused, glancing over his shoulder again, before speaking again, slower this time. "I didn't want you to find out this way, but I need to tell you, everything you think you know about Lily, about her art, about the sketchbook, about this whole mess is wrong. It's all a lie, Emily. He took a shaky breath, his eyes darting to his phone, as if checking for something. Lily never wanted any of this. She didn't want to be discovered. She didn't want to be a star. Emily stared at him, her pulse quickening. What was he talking about? This wasn't making sense. She had always seen the way Lily had fought for recognition, for the chance to showcase her art. She had watched her friend pour her soul into those drawings, not just for fame, but because it was the only thing that ever made her feel truly alive. What do you mean? What do you know, Jake? Where is she? Why would she leave without a word? Emily's voice cracked with frustration. Jake swallowed hard, as if the words were weighing heavily on him. Lily didn't leave, Emily. She's not missing. She's been hiding. The shock of his words froze Emily in place. Hiding? Hiding from what? And why would Lily do that? Jake's gaze shifted, and Emily felt her stomach twist with an unexplainable sense of dread. There was something far deeper going on than she realized, something lurking in the shadows that neither of them had been able to understand. Lily wasn't just running away from her past, Jake continued, his voice barely above a whisper. She was running from me. At that moment, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Everything Emily thought she knew about Lily, about their friendship, about the sketchbook, it all felt like a lie. What are you talking about? She whispered, her voice trembling now. What do you mean, running from you? Jake hesitated for a long moment, his hands gripping his coffee cup like a lifeline. When he spoke again, the weight of his words seemed to hang heavy in the air between them. I didn't just know Lily from the art world, Emily. I was part of the reason she got into it in the first place. But not in the way you think. I was a part of something much darker, something I promised I'd leave behind. And when Lily started drawing those sketches, when she started sharing them with me, it became clear she'd unwittingly tapped into something far beyond her understanding. He paused, swallowing hard. The sketches weren't just her way of expressing herself. They were a map to something much older, something dangerous. Emily felt a cold shiver run through her. She had always known that Lily's art was different, that there was something otherworldly about it, but this was beyond what she could have ever imagined. A map to what, Jake? What are you saying? Jake's voice dropped even lower, his eyes darting around again, as if the walls themselves were closing in on them. The sketches, they were leading to something hidden. Something that people have been searching for years. A secret, Emily. A secret so powerful that if it fell into the wrong hands, it could change everything. A sick feeling twisted in Emily's gut as the pieces began to fall into place. All the strange messages, all the cryptic symbols, all the odd behavior, this wasn't just about art. This was about something much more sinister. But the most unsettling part, the one that made Emily's blood run cold, Jake wasn't finished. He leaned in closer, his voice barely a whisper now. I'm not the only one looking for it. Someone else, someone very powerful, has been following Lily for months. And they're not just interested in her sketches. They want her. And if they find her, they'll stop at nothing to use her and her drawings to unlock what's hidden. Emily felt the weight of Jake's words crash over her, the suffocating realization sinking in. What are you saying, Jake? Who are you talking about? Jake's eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time, Emily saw something in them that she had never seen before: guilt. Fear. A deep, unresolved panic. I'm not just trying to help you find Lily. I've been trying to protect her. And now, I'm trying to protect you. He took a deep breath, and in that moment, everything Emily thought she knew about her friendship with Jake, about the people around her, about the dangerous path she'd been walking, it all shifted. The truth is, Emily, I've been the one who's been keeping you in the dark this whole time. I'm not just trying to find Lily. I've been trying to stop this from happening. And now, it's too late. The room seemed to close in on Emily as she tried to make sense of Jake's confession. Was he involved in this conspiracy? Had he been lying to her all along? And if so, what was his true agenda? Was he the ally he claimed to be, or was he part of the very thing that had put Lily's life in danger? Jake's sudden change in demeanor made Emily question everything. The urgency, the fear, could he be trusted? Or was she just another pawn in this dangerous game of secrets, betrayal, and hidden agendas? Everything she had believed about Lily, about her missing friend, was now tainted by doubt. And as Jake's words settled in her mind, one thing became painfully clear: someone was watching them. The days that followed Jake's revelation felt like they were slipping through Emily's fingers, each passing hour sinking her deeper into a web of deception, fear, and uncertainty. Every moment that she thought she had a grip on the situation, something else would unravel, pulling her further away from the truth, yet closer to the terrifying reality she couldn't deny anymore. The lines between ally and enemy blurred in ways that felt impossible to untangle. As Emily walked the thin line between survival and uncovering the truth, she knew she was running out of time. But she wasn't just racing against an unknown enemy anymore. Now, she was running against herself, her own fear, doubt, and the inescapable pressure of the choices she had to make. One evening, as the sky dimmed to a bruised purple, she received a call that would forever change the trajectory of her life. It was her mother. And there was something about the way she said Emily's name, soft and trembling, that made her stomach flip. Her mother's voice had never wavered before. She was the strong one, the protector, the one who always kept things together. But tonight, Emily could hear the strain in every word. "Sweetheart, I think it's time we talked. It's about Jake. About the things he's been involved in." Emily's pulse quickened, the weight of the conversation hanging heavy in the air before her mother even spoke again. "I don't know what to say to you, but he's not who you think he is. He's not just a friend to you, or to Lily." Her mother's warning struck with such suddenness that Emily couldn't breathe for a moment. Her mind reeled, her thoughts spinning like a storm, the pieces of her life falling into place in ways she couldn't have prepared for. Could it be true? Could Jake have been lying to her all along? Or was this just another layer of the puzzle, another game someone was playing? And how could she trust anyone now, after everything she'd uncovered? She'd already found herself caught in a deadly dance of half-truths and secrets, and now it seemed like the walls were closing in faster than she could keep up. She needed answers, but the more she sought them, the more the danger seemed to intensify. Later that night, she found herself sitting in front of Jake, the weight of the situation crashing down on her. He had asked her to meet him at their usual spot, a secluded bench by the lake, the place where they used to sit for hours as teenagers, talking about dreams, about the future, about everything and nothing all at once. It felt almost surreal, as if she was about to confront the past, trying to reconnect with something that no longer existed. Jake was waiting for her when she arrived, his face ashen, eyes hollow from what seemed like days without sleep. He looked like a man who had been carrying a burden far too heavy to bear alone, and Emily could see that whatever this was, it had shattered him. When she sat down beside him, there was a silence that neither of them could break. For a long time, neither spoke, the weight of the unsaid words hanging between them. Finally, Jake exhaled, his voice low. "Emily, I'm trying to protect you. From them. From the people who are looking for Lily, from the people who are watching you right now. I've been trying to keep you safe, but it's getting harder. And I don't know how much longer I can keep you out of this." She felt the familiar chill crawl up her spine. Who was watching her? And more importantly, why was Jake suddenly acting like her only protector when he had just admitted to hiding something from her all along? "What do you mean, Jake? Who's after us? Why didn't you tell me the truth before?" she demanded, her voice shaking with the combination of frustration and fear. Jake's eyes flickered to the darkened lake, the reflection of the distant city lights barely visible on the water's surface. "It's not as simple as you think. It never was. I couldn't tell you because if you knew, you'd be in even more danger. But I can't protect you forever." He paused, then turned to face her, his eyes filled with regret and a kind of quiet desperation. "Emily, I need you to trust me. This isn't just about finding Lily anymore. It's bigger than that. And you need to decide if you're willing to be part of this. Because if you are, it's going to cost you more than you could ever imagine." Emily stared at him, her heart pounding so loudly in her chest that it almost drowned out his words. Part of her wanted to believe him, to take his hand, to trust him and go along with whatever twisted path they were about to walk together. But another part, a voice deep inside, was screaming at her to run. To walk away and never look back. She didn't know who to trust anymore, didn't know if anyone had ever been truthful with her. And the danger that had been lurking in the background was now all too real. It wasn't just Lily's life at stake anymore, it was hers too. And yet, the truth tugged at her like an invisible thread, pulling her closer even as the ground beneath her feet began to shift. Jake. Before she could finish her sentence, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor shifted. His face went pale, his jaw tightening. Without a word, he stood up abruptly, holding out a hand for her to follow him. "Come on. We need to go now." "It's too late," he said, urgency in his voice. Emily's heart leapt into her throat. What was happening? Was it too late to turn back? They ran together through the dark streets, Emily's mind racing, her thoughts jumbled as they made their way to a place she didn't recognize, a run-down building in the outskirts of town, its windows dark, its doors locked tight. Jake glanced around nervously, as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. When they reached the door, he paused. "There's no going back after this. You're in this now, whether you like it or not. But whatever you decide, you need to know once you walk through that door, the truth will change everything. It'll either destroy you or free you. And you may never be the same again." She stood there, frozen, staring at the door as the weight of his words crashed down on her. What was behind it? And what would it cost her to finally uncover the truth? The decision loomed before her like a shadow, and as the seconds ticked by, Emily realized that the path she had been walking had led her here not just to a physical door, but to the precipice of everything she had ever known. The truth, she understood, was no longer just a search. It was a battle. And there was no way to turn back. The choice was hers. But every choice from here on out would change everything. The moment Emily stepped through the door of the rundown building, she knew she had crossed a line. The air inside was thick with tension, and the dimly lit hallway stretched out before her like an ominous tunnel. Jake led the way, his footsteps heavy, and every door they passed seemed to close off the world outside. Emily's heart was pounding in her chest, each beat a reminder that there was no turning back. She couldn't shake the feeling that the walls themselves were closing in, as if she were walking straight into the heart of something far darker than she could have ever imagined. The truth, she thought, was supposed to be the answer, but now, it felt like it might be the thing that would shatter everything she'd ever known. They stopped in front of a large steel door at the end of the hallway, and Jake glanced at her, his eyes full of an unspoken warning. "Whatever you see in there, Emily, it's bigger than anything we've talked about. These people, they're not just after Lily. They've been after this for a long time. And if they get what they want, everything changes." Emily nodded, her pulse racing. She wasn't sure what she was walking into, but she had no choice now. They were too far gone, and the weight of what Jake had said hung over her like a storm cloud ready to break. With a sudden jerk, Jake pushed open the door, revealing a large, empty room filled with nothing but a long table in the center, scattered papers, and a series of monitors on the far wall. Emily's eyes locked onto one of the screens. At first, she thought it was a mistake. But the more she stared, the more she realized that what she was seeing was real. Images. Of her. Of Lily. Of people she had met along the way, people she thought were on her side. Each person was marked by a symbol, a code. Her own face was on one of the monitors, highlighted in red, a target in a web of connections. It was like something out of a conspiracy thriller, but it was real. And it wasn't just her life on the line. It was everyone's. Jake stepped closer to the monitor, his expression grim. "This is what they've been tracking. The people behind Lily's sketches, behind all of this, it's not just a few individuals. It's an organization. And they've been pulling strings for years." Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the screen. The images were too detailed, too accurate. These weren't just random people. They were connected, like pieces on a chessboard, and the more she looked, the more she understood. This was bigger than anything she could have imagined. It wasn't just about Lily or her art anymore. It was about something far more dangerous. And then, like a punch to the gut, the door slammed shut behind them. Emily spun around, her heart in her throat, but there was no time to react before a figure stepped into the room, a figure she knew all too well. It was Rachel, Lily's cousin. The one person Emily had always trusted, the one who had always been there, offering her help, offering advice, even when things felt too complicated. But as Rachel stepped forward, the smile she gave Emily wasn't comforting. It was cold, calculating. "I'm sorry, Emily," Rachel said softly, almost too sweetly. "But it looks like you've stumbled into something that you shouldn't have." Emily's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady, but the fear was starting to leak through. Rachel stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with something dark. "Jake's right. There's a lot more to this than you realize. But it's not just about protecting Lily or saving you. It's about controlling the narrative. About controlling the power that's hidden in those sketches. About making sure no one else ever gets their hands on it." The words hit Emily like a slap to the face. Rachel was one of them. She was part of the very group that had been hunting Lily, that had been orchestrating this whole twisted game. And all along, Emily had been blind to it. Rachel didn't wait for Emily to process what she had said. "You were never supposed to find out. But since you did, I guess I have no choice but to make sure you don't leave here alive." It all clicked then. The lies, the subtle manipulations, the way Rachel had always been just a little too eager to help, but never really helping. The cold smile that curled at the edges of Rachel's lips was the final nail in the coffin. She had been playing her all along, just like everyone else. Before Emily could react, Rachel pulled out a gun, the metal gleaming under the flickering lights. It felt like the entire room was closing in on her. There was no escape, no way out. This wasn't just a conspiracy, it was a trap, and Emily had walked straight into it. The cold, hard truth had finally hit her. Someone she trusted was trying to kill her, and she didn't know who else was in on it. But then, something unexpected happened. Jake lunged forward, knocking the gun from Rachel's hand, sending it skidding across the floor. Emily stumbled back, heart racing as the two of them struggled. Jake's voice was low and strained. "You've gone too far, Rachel. You can't control this anymore. You're not the one calling the shots." Rachel's eyes blazed with fury, her face twisting in a mix of rage and fear. "You think I'm the problem here," she spat, her voice rising. "You've always been part of the problem, Jake. You were never supposed to be a part of this. And neither were you, Emily." The words hung in the air, heavy with the realization that this conspiracy wasn't just about Lily's art. It wasn't even about the hidden power of those sketches. This was about control, about making sure that no one could ever uncover the truth, no one could ever break free from the network of lies and manipulation that had been built up over years. And now, Emily was at the center of it, forced to choose between everything she thought she knew and the terrifying unknown that stretched out before her. As the tension between Jake and Rachel reached a boiling point, Emily realized that she had no choice left. She had to make a decision. She could either stay and fight, or she could run. But as Rachel's cold laugh echoed through the room, Emily understood one painful truth: there was no place to hide. The only thing left was to face the nightmare head-on and pray that somehow, someway, she could survive it. But as Rachel's grip tightened around her, and Jake seemed to be losing his hold, Emily could feel the walls closing in again. The deeper she went, the more she realized the truth was no longer just something to uncover. It was something to survive. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with the metallic scent of fear and sweat. Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest as the realization of what had been unfolding around her fully settled in. Jake and Rachel were locked in a deadly struggle, the weight of their confrontation pushing the room into an almost surreal stillness between each violent exchange. It was as if time had stopped, and the only thing that mattered in that moment was survival. Rachel's face twisted with fury, her voice a low hiss as she fought to overpower Jake. "You've always been weak, Jake. That's why you never belonged here. You think you can protect her, but it's too late. This is bigger than both of you." Jake grunted, his breath ragged as he tried to hold Rachel back. His face was pale, covered in sweat, but there was a fire in his eyes that Emily had never seen before. "You've made a mistake, Rachel. This isn't about controlling anyone anymore. It's about freedom. The truth is bigger than you can understand." Rachel laughed bitterly, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Freedom? You think you've been playing by your own rules? You've been a pawn in this game since day one. We control everything, we decide who wins. You're all just too naive to see it. As the words hit her like a freight train, a cold, sinking feeling spread through Emily's veins. There was no escaping this. No running. Everything she had learned, the lies, the secrets, the dangers, had been part of something far more intricate than she could have ever imagined. The conspiracy was far-reaching, its claws sunk deep into every corner of her life. And now, as she stood in that dim room, watching the fight unfold before her, she realized one terrifying truth. She was caught in a war between people who had mastered manipulation, deception, and control. But she hadn't given up yet. She wasn't going down without a fight. With every ounce of strength she could muster, Emily lunged forward, grabbing a chair nearby and slamming it between Jake and Rachel. The impact startled them both, momentarily halting their chaotic struggle. For a fleeting moment, Rachel's cold eyes met Emily's, and the smirk that crossed her face was like a knife twisting into her gut. You think you can stop me? You have no idea what you're up against. But before Emily could respond, she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat, a small, half-hidden object on the floor beneath the table. It was a flash drive. The same kind of device Jake had mentioned earlier. She reached down, grabbing it with trembling hands, the weight of its significance crashing down on her. This was it. This was the key to everything. The answer to why she had been dragged into this nightmare, why her life had been turned upside down by lies, manipulation, and death threats. As she held the flash drive in her hand, the world around her seemed to go into slow motion. Jake and Rachel's fight had paused, their eyes both locked on the device now in Emily's grasp. For a moment, no one moved. It was like the whole room had become a frozen snapshot of impending destruction. Rachel's lips parted, her gaze flickering with a mix of fury and disbelief. No, you don't understand. That's not for you. You have no idea what you're holding. Jake's voice was strained, his hand still outstretched. Emily, don't open it. Not yet. This isn't how it's supposed to end. But Emily wasn't listening anymore. Her mind was made up. She had already been dragged so far into this mess, her life no longer just a series of random events. It was all connected. This was the truth, the final puzzle piece. She inserted the flash drive into a nearby computer, her fingers shaking as the screen flickered to life. It wasn't just a list of files. It was a map. A map that showed the true scale of the conspiracy, locations, dates, names, everything. It wasn't just a group of shadowy figures pulling strings from the darkness. It was a network. An organized system that stretched across the entire country, and beyond. People she had met along the way, people she had trusted, had all been part of it. Her mother, Rachel, even Jake. It was the ultimate betrayal. She had been a part of it all along, and hadn't even known it. The files revealed names she hadn't expected, important names. Authorities, business leaders, even high-ranking government officials. This wasn't just about art or sketches. It was about control, about the ability to shape the world. The people behind this conspiracy weren't just manipulating people, they were building something much more dangerous. They were rewriting the narrative of reality itself. And Emily had been a key part of their plan. Her father's death, her mother's strange behavior, her interactions with Lily, all of it was tied to this web of deceit. She had been a pawn in a game she hadn't even known existed. As the pieces clicked into place, Emily's mind spun. The breath caught in her throat as a horrifying realization settled in. She wasn't just an innocent bystander in this battle, she had been groomed for something much worse. She had been chosen for something that involved Lily's sketches, her art, and a power that no one was supposed to control. Emily had been meant to carry this secret, to be the key to unlocking it. But now, she knew the truth, and it terrified her. In the midst of her shock, Rachel's cold laugh rang out again, harsh and triumphant. You think you've won? You think you've uncovered everything? You're just a pawn in this, Emily. It all clicked then. The lies, the subtle manipulations, the way Rachel had always been just a little too eager to help, but never really helping. The cold smile that curled at the edges of Rachel's lips was the final nail in the coffin. She had been playing her all along, just like everyone else. Before Emily could react, Rachel pulled out a gun, the metal gleaming under the flickering lights. It felt like the entire room was closing in on her. There was no escape, no way out. This wasn't just a conspiracy, it was a trap, and Emily had walked straight into it. The cold, hard truth had finally hit her. Someone she trusted was trying to kill her, and she didn't know who else was in on it. But then, something unexpected happened. Jake lunged forward, knocking the gun from Rachel's hand, sending it skidding across the floor. Emily stumbled back, heart racing as the two of them struggled. Jake's voice was low and strained. "You've gone too far, Rachel. You can't control this anymore. You're not the one calling the shots." Rachel's eyes blazed with fury, her face twisting in a mix of rage and fear. "You think I'm the problem here," she spat, her voice rising. "You've always been part of the problem, Jake. You were never supposed to be a part of this. And neither were you, Emily." The words hung in the air, heavy with the realization that this conspiracy wasn't just about Lily's art. It wasn't even about the hidden power of those sketches. This was about control, about making sure that no one could ever uncover the truth, no one could ever break free from the network of lies and manipulation that had been built up over years. And now, Emily was at the center of it, forced to choose between everything she thought she knew and the terrifying unknown that stretched out before her. As the tension between Jake and Rachel reached a boiling point, Emily realized that she had no choice left. She had to make a decision. She could either stay and fight, or she could run. But as Rachel's cold laugh echoed through the room, Emily understood one painful truth: there was no place to hide. The only thing left was to face the nightmare head-on and pray that somehow, someway, she could survive it. But as Rachel's grip tightened around her, and Jake seemed to be losing his hold, Emily could feel the walls closing in again. The deeper she went, the more she realized the truth was no longer just something to uncover. It was something to survive. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with the metallic scent of fear and sweat. Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest as the realization of what had been unfolding around her fully settled in. Jake and Rachel were locked in a deadly struggle, the weight of their confrontation pushing the room into an almost surreal stillness between each violent exchange. It was as if time had stopped, and the only thing that mattered in that moment was survival. Rachel's face twisted with fury, her voice a low hiss as she fought to overpower Jake. "You've always been weak, Jake. That's why you never belonged here. You think you can protect her, but it's too late. This is bigger than both of you." Jake grunted, his breath ragged as he tried to hold Rachel back. His face was pale, covered in sweat, but there was a fire in his eyes that Emily had never seen before. "You've made a mistake, Rachel. This isn't about controlling anyone anymore. It's about freedom. The truth is bigger than you can understand." Rachel laughed bitterly, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Freedom? You think you've been playing by your own rules? You've been a pawn in this game since day one. We control everything, we decide who wins. You're all just too naive to see it." As the words hit her like a freight train, a cold, sinking feeling spread through Emily's veins. There was no escaping this. No running. Everything she had learned, the lies, the secrets, the dangers, had been part of something far more intricate than she could have ever imagined. The conspiracy was far-reaching, its claws sunk deep into every corner of her life. And now, as she stood in that dim room, watching the fight unfold before her, she realized one terrifying truth. She was caught in a war between people who had mastered manipulation, deception, and control. But she hadn't given up yet. She wasn't going down without a fight. With every ounce of strength she could muster, Emily lunged forward, grabbing a chair nearby and slamming it between Jake and Rachel. The impact startled them both, momentarily halting their chaotic struggle. For a fleeting moment, Rachel's cold eyes met Emily's, and the smirk that crossed her face was like a knife twisting into her gut. "You think you can stop me? You have no idea what you're up against." But before Emily could respond, she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat, a small, half-hidden object on the floor beneath the table. It was a flash drive. The same kind of device Jake had mentioned earlier. She reached down, grabbing it with trembling hands, the weight of its significance crashing down on her. This was it. This was the key to everything. The answer to why she had been dragged into this nightmare, why her life had been turned upside down by lies, manipulation, and death threats. As she held the flash drive in her hand, The world around her seemed to go into slow motion. Jake and Rachel's fight had paused, their eyes both locked on the device now in Emily's grasp. For a moment, no one moved. It was like the whole room had become a frozen snapshot of impending destruction. Rachel's lips parted, her gaze flickering with a mix of fury and disbelief. No. No, you don't understand. That's not for you. You have no idea what you're holding. Jake's voice was strained, his hand still outstretched. Emily, don't open it. Not yet. This isn't how it's supposed to end. But Emily wasn't listening anymore. Her mind was made up. She had already been dragged so far into this mess, her life no longer just a series of random events. It was all connected. This was the truth, the final puzzle piece. She inserted the flash drive into a nearby computer, her fingers shaking as the screen flickered to life. It wasn't just a list of files. It was a map. A map that showed the true scale of the conspiracy, locations, dates, names, everything. It wasn't just a group of shadowy figures pulling strings from the darkness. It was a network. An organized system that stretched across the entire country, and beyond. People she had met along the way, people she had trusted, had all been part of it. Her mother, Rachel, even Jake. It was the ultimate betrayal. She had been a part of it all along, and hadn't even known it. The files revealed names she hadn't expected, important names. Authorities, business leaders, even high-ranking government officials. This wasn't just about art or sketches. It was about control, about the ability to shape the world. The people behind this conspiracy weren't just manipulating people, they were building something much more dangerous. They were rewriting the narrative of reality itself. And Emily had been a key part of their plan. Her father's death, her mother's strange behavior, her interactions with Lily, all of it was tied to this web of deceit. She had been a pawn in a game she hadn't even known existed. As the pieces clicked into place, Emily's mind spun. The breath caught in her throat as a horrifying realization settled in. She wasn't just an innocent bystander in this battle, she had been groomed for something much worse. She had been chosen for something that involved Lily's sketches, her art, and a power that no one was supposed to control. Emily had been meant to carry this secret, to be the key to unlocking it. But now, she knew the truth, and it terrified her. In the midst of her shock, Rachel's cold laugh rang out again, harsh and triumphant. You think you've won? You think you've uncovered everything? You're just a pawn in this, Emily. You always were. And the people behind this, they won't stop until they have what they want. You're the last piece of the puzzle. Her words were like a death sentence, and as Emily's mind reeled, she realized with horrifying clarity that Rachel wasn't just talking about her. She was talking about something bigger. Something much more dangerous. And then, just as the truth seemed to crush down on her like a ton of bricks, a loud bang echoed through the room. The door behind them exploded open, and in a split second, armed men rushed in, people Emily had never seen before, but who were clearly on Rachel's side. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The sheer force of their presence was enough. In that instant, everything fell apart. Jake shoved Emily away, his face pale, his hand gripping his own weapon. But before Emily could react, he was pulled to the ground, restrained by two men who had somehow anticipated his every move. Rachel stood over Emily, a look of cold satisfaction on her face. It's over. You never had a chance to begin with. This is bigger than you, bigger than anyone. And now, you're going to help us finish it. But just as Emily's world seemed to crumble, one last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. It wasn't the truth that had set her free, it was the moment she realized that the truth was never what she thought it was. She wasn't the victim. She wasn't the pawn. She was the one who had been playing the game all along. And the only way to escape was to flip the script on everyone else. The final twist, the one no one saw coming, was that Emily had been waiting for this moment all along. She had known, in her gut, that the real power wasn't in the truth, it was in what she chose to do with it. And in this final, heart-stopping moment, she decided, she wasn't going down without a fight. The game was far from over, the silence that followed was suffocating. It wasn't just the stillness of the room, but the weight of everything Emily had uncovered, the truth, the betrayals, the lies. As she stood there, breathless and battered from the chaos that had just unfolded, a strange sense of finality hung in the air. The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But Emily had come to realize that it never really was. This story, this twisted web that had consumed her, wasn't something that could be wrapped up neatly with a bow. It was bigger than her, bigger than any of them. And in that moment, Emily understood something she hadn't before. The power of the truth wasn't in its revelation. It was in the choices that followed it. She stood alone in the room now, the echoes of the struggle still hanging in the air. Rachel was gone, taken away by the very people who had once supported her. Jake was recovering, his bruised face betraying the weight of everything he'd had to endure. But it wasn't just physical scars that marked them. Emily had seen something else in his eyes when their gazes met, a flicker of understanding, a recognition of the same burden she now carried. The truth had shattered everything they knew, but it also gave them something they hadn't had before, clarity. The moment they had uncovered the full scope of the conspiracy, they knew it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about choice, how they chose to move forward with the knowledge they had. The truth had been so much darker than they ever imagined. It had destroyed relationships, broken trust, and left behind a trail of wreckage. But Emily had learned that there was no point in holding on to the weight of it all, not anymore. She had to decide what she would do with the pieces of the puzzle she had uncovered. The power that had once seemed so overwhelming now felt like something she could control. It was hers to keep, or to discard. She wasn't a victim anymore. She wasn't the one they'd been hunting. She was free, and that was the gift she'd been given. But freedom, she realized, wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. As she left the building with Jake, the night air cool against her skin, there was no victory march, no celebrations, no sense of closure. It was just the two of them, walking away from a past that would never let them go. They didn't speak much. There wasn't much to say. The weight of everything that had happened lingered, but there was something else, too, something unspoken, an understanding between them. They were survivors. Back at her apartment, Emily sat by the window, looking out at the city below. It had been a long, exhausting journey. She thought about everything, her mother, Lily, the sketches, the people she had trusted, and the ones who had betrayed her. She thought about the web of lies that had been spun around her, the people who had hidden in plain sight, pulling strings, manipulating events. For a while, she had been lost, a pawn in a game she couldn't comprehend. But now, she understood something profound. The world was full of hidden agendas, of secrets buried beneath layers of truth. Some people would do anything to keep their grip on power. And there would always be someone waiting in the shadows, ready to pull the strings again. The question was no longer what the conspiracy was or who had been involved, it was what Emily was going to do next. The flash drive she had hidden in her drawer seemed to pulse with its own dark energy, a constant reminder of the choices ahead. There were still pieces of the puzzle that hadn't been found, still loose ends, unanswered questions that would linger forever. The organization, the people behind it all, were still out there. And while Rachel might be out of the picture for now, Emily knew that she was far from safe. There were always more players in the game. More secrets to uncover. More twists to come. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. She stood, her hand instinctively reaching for the flash drive. She wasn't ready to face the world yet, not fully. But then again, maybe she never would be. She had seen too much, learned too much, to ever go back to her old life. When she opened the door, Jake stood on the other side, his expression serious, eyes searching hers for something, an answer, a clue, maybe even reassurance. He didn't speak right away. There was no need for words. Emily felt the same uncertainty in him that she was feeling in herself. They had both been irrevocably changed, and the road ahead was murky, filled with shadows and hidden dangers. "I've been thinking," Jake said, his voice low. "What if this isn't over? What if it never will be?" Emily looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She wanted to say something comforting, something that would make sense of all of it. But she knew the truth now. The truth was that there would always be more questions. There would always be more mysteries. Life was a labyrinth of secrets, and all they could do was try to navigate it. Together. "You're right," Emily said, her voice steady, though she felt the stirrings of uncertainty deep inside. But we'll figure it out. One step at a time. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know what the conspiracy would do next or how deep the rabbit hole really went. All she knew was that she had the power to make her own choices now. She wasn't just part of their story anymore. She was writing her own. As Jake turned to leave, Emily closed the door behind him. But before she could walk away, she glanced back at the drawer where she had hidden the flash drive. Something pulled at her, a nagging feeling she couldn't shake. As the screen of her laptop flickered to life, a small notification blinked at the corner. A new message. Her breath caught in her throat as she clicked it open. It was a single sentence, but it was enough to freeze her blood. "We're still watching you." A chill ran down Emily's spine. The conspiracy hadn't ended. It was just evolving. And though she had fought to uncover the truth, she knew now that the battle was far from over. It would never truly end, not until everyone involved was either exposed or silenced. The game, as she now understood it, wasn't about truth or lies. It was about power and who was strong enough to wield it. With a steady hand, Emily turned off the laptop. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She knew what was at stake, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The shadows had been lurking all along. But now, she was the one standing in the light, ready to fight back. And as she walked away from the glowing screen, one last thought lingered in her mind: the story wasn't over. It had only just begun.